Chapter 2, Astral Adventuring. If you're a player or a dungeon master who wants to know more about spelljamming and the astral plane, this chapter is for you. It expands on what's written about the astral plane in the Dungeon Master's Guide and includes an assortment of spells, magic items, and spelljamming ships. How spelljamming works. Spelljamming is the act of using a spelljamming helm, described later in the chapter, to propel and maneuver a ship. The individual that operates the helm is called a spelljammer. Speed. When cruising through space, a spelljamming ship can travel 100 million miles in 24 hours. At this speed, the spelljamming helm makes minor course corrections on its own to avoid collisions with meteorites, other detritus, and space-dwelling creatures. These slight course corrections sometimes cause mild space sickness, which is a harmless affliction common among those who aren't accustomed to space travel. A spelljamming ship automatically slows to its flying speed, discussed later in this chapter, when it comes close to something big enough to have its own air envelope and gravity plane. See air envelopes and gravity planes below, such as another ship, a Kindori, see Boo's astral menagerie, an asteroid, or a planet. The exact distance between the obstacle and the ship is for the DM to decide, but whatever obstacle caused the ship to slow down is usually close enough to be seen by creatures on deck. While moving at its flying speed, a spelljamming ship is generally as maneuverable as a seafaring vessel of a similar size. Sensations. Using a spelljamming helm to move a ship produces a feeling in the spelljammer, similar to moving a limb that has fallen asleep, a pins and needles sensation, though not as painful as its analog. When the ship approaches something large in space, the spelljammer is usually the first to detect it as the ship slows down. An experienced spelljammer can often sense what caused the ship to slow down a few moments before it can be seen. An asteroid feels different from a space galleon or a pod of Kindori, for example. Spelljammer duels. A ship can have more than one spelljamming helm aboard it, but only one spelljamming helm at a time can be used to control the ship. If a spelljammer tries to gain control of a ship by using a second spelljamming helm, a spelljammer duel ensues. Resolve this conflict by having each spelljammer make a constitution check. If the dueling spelljammers tie, have them reroll. The spelljammer with the lowest check result loses the duel and gains 1 to 4 levels of exhaustion. In addition, their attunement to their spelljamming helm ends at once, and they can't attune to any spelljamming helm until all levels of exhaustion are removed from them. Air envelopes. When a creature or an object leaves a planet's atmosphere and enters willed space, an envelope of breathable air forms around it and lasts until that air is depleted. Air envelopes of creatures. The envelope of breathable air that forms around a creature takes the shape of a cube centered on that creature. The creature size determines the cube's dimensions, as shown in the air envelopes of creatures table. Air envelopes of creatures table. Tiny, 2.5 foot cube. Small or medium, 5 foot cube. Large, 10 foot cube. Huge, 15 foot cube. Gargantuan, 20 foot cube. A creature that needs to breathe will exhaust the air in its personal envelope in 1 minute. Since this is barely enough time to get anywhere, most creatures travel through wild space aboard spelljamming ships, which have much larger air envelopes. Air envelopes of objects. The envelope of breathable air that forms around an object extends out from its surface a distance equal to the longest dimension of its form. For example, a spherical planet 5,000 miles in diameter has an air envelope 15,000 miles in diameter, with the planet at the center of it. An air envelope need not be spherical. For example, a block of wood 1 foot by 2 feet by 3 feet is surrounded by a more or less rectangular envelope of air 3 feet by 6 feet by 9 feet. The air envelope around a spelljamming ship typically has an ovoid shape. Diagram 2.1 shows the air envelope that surrounds a nautiloid that has a keel length of 180 feet. It extends 180 feet from the ship in all directions. The air envelope around a habitable planet or moon is called an atmosphere. An atmosphere is a special kind of air envelope that replenishes itself constantly. A creature or an object can refresh its air envelope by entering the atmosphere of a planet or moon. See overlapping air envelopes below. Fire in WILDSPAC. Although non-magical fire cannot exist in the vacuum of willed space, magical fire, such as that created by a fireball spell, does burn in a vacuum. Magical fire does not cause objects to burst into flame, however, because there is no air to make ignition possible. Air quality. The air envelope around a body or ship can be fresh, foul, or deadly. Air can change from one quality to another over time. Fresh air is completely breathable. Under normal circumstances, the air envelope of a ship remains fresh for 120 days. If a ship carries more creatures than its normal crew complement, they exhaust the supply of fresh air more quickly. Foul air is stale and partially depleted. It is humid and smells bad. Any creature that breathes foul air becomes poisoned until it breathes fresh air again. The air aboard a ship with a normal crew complement degrades from fresh to foul on day 121, and the foul air turns deadly 120 days later. Deadly air is unbreathable. Any creature that tries to breathe deadly air begins to suffocate. See the rules on suffocation in the player's handbook. Overlapping air envelopes. When two bodies come close enough to each other, their air envelopes merge, and the quality of the air around the smaller body changes to match that of the larger body. When the bodies later move away from each other, each one reclaims and retains its own air envelope. For example, if a damn selfly ship with a foul air envelope enters the atmosphere of a planet with fresh air, the two air envelopes merge, and the damn selfly ship's air quality changes from foul to fresh. If that ship then merges its fresh air envelope with the deadly air envelope surrounding a derelict ship, the damn selfly ship's air quality would change from fresh to deadly. Gravity planes. The reason everything pulls its own atmosphere along through space is the force of gravity. It's also the reason why creatures can stand on a spacefaring ship without falling off the deck. In willed space and on the astral plane, gravity is an accommodating force in that the direction of its effect seems to be that which is most convenient. For an object the size of a planet or moon, gravity pulls everything toward the center of the body, meaning that creatures can stand upright anywhere on the surface, and dropped objects fall perpendicular to the surface they land on. For smaller objects, such as spacecraft, gravity doesn't radiate from a point, but rather from a plane that cuts horizontally through the object and extends out as far as its air envelope. An object's gravity plane is two-directional. A creature can stand upright on the bottom of a ship's hull, upside down from the perspective of those elsewhere on the ship, and move around as easily as if it were walking on the top deck. Diagram 2.1 shows the location of the gravity plane of a nautiloid by way of example and indicates the directions in which its gravity operates. One of the unusual properties of a gravity plane is that an object that falls off the side of a ship can end up oscillating back and forth across the gravity plane. It drops in one direction until it crosses the plane, then reverses direction back toward the plane again, continuing until something causes it to stop. Overlapping gravity planes. When gravity planes intersect, such as when two ships pass close to each other and at different angles, the gravity planes of both ships remain in effect until the two ships touch one another, as often happens when they collide or when one ship lands on the other. If that happens, the gravity plane of the ship that has more hit points remaining, regardless of the ship's actual dimensions, overrides the other ship's gravity plane, suppressing it as long as the ships remain in contact, and the first ship's definition of up becomes the other ship's as well. When a ship touches down on a planet or some other enormous body, the ship's gravity plane is suppressed. If a ship has one or more decks on the ventral side of the ship's gravity plane, rather than its dorsal side, precautions must be taken before the ship lands to secure anyone and anything that might fall when the ship's gravity plane is suppressed. Drifting. When a spelljamming ship moves in space, creatures and objects in its air envelope move with it, pulled along with the ship because of the strength of its gravity plane. However, an unanchored creature or object floating in a ship's air envelope is weightless and drifts toward the edge of the air envelope at a speed of 10 feet per minute. For example, an unconscious sailor or a crate that falls off the deck of a spelljamming ship would begin drifting away from the ship along its gravity plane toward the edge of the ship's air envelope. When it exits the air envelope, the sailor or the crate would be left behind as the ship moves away from it. Falling. A floating creature that enters the air envelope of a larger body is immediately affected by the larger body's gravity, such as that of a planet, or gravity plane, such as that of a spelljamming ship. The creature falls from where it entered the air envelope to the surface of that body, or to the gravity plane of that body, whichever is nearer. Normal damage from the fall applies if the creature hits something solid at the end of the fall. A creature or an object that falls across a gravity plane takes no damage from the fall, but begins oscillating from one side of the gravity plane to the other, as described above. The astral plane. Every world of the material plane is situated in willed space, or more precisely, in its own Weld space system. Willed space systems are airless oceans teeming with space-dwelling life forms, including spores, space plankton, and larger creatures that resemble fish and aquatic mammals. The ones that need air to survive either generate their own air envelopes or live in the air envelopes of other creatures. Willed space is where the astral plane overlaps with the material plane. Creatures and objects in willed space age normally and exist on both planes simultaneously. This overlap enables creatures to use spells such as teleport and teleportation circle to travel from willed space to a nearby world, or vice versa. Diagram 2.2 illustrates how the astral sea surrounds all the willed space systems, as well as the astral dominions of gods and the floating remains of dead gods. See the Astral Dominions and Dead Gods sidebar. Many willed space systems have names. For example, Realm Space is a wild space system that contains, among other things, the planet Toril, home of the Forgotten Realms setting. The following sections describe how astral travelers can get from one wild space system to another, as well as features of the astral plane that are likely to come into play. Sidebar: Astral Dominions and Dead Gods. Many gods have dominions in the astral sea. These locations typically take the form of floating islands or cities of fantastic proportions. Astral travelers might visit these dominions as they would any other ports of call, though a dominion's divine ruler always knows when visitors have arrived and what their intentions are. Because these dominions are part of the astral sea, they are timeless. Nothing ages there, and creatures can survive there indefinitely without food or drink. The astral sea is also where one can find the petrified remains of gods who were slain by more powerful entities, or who lost all their mortal worshippers and perished as a result. A dead god looks like a gigantic, nondescript stone statue that bears little resemblance to the divine entity it once was. Githyanki, mind flayers, Surlins, and other natives of the astral plane sometimes turn these drifting hulks into outposts and cities, many of which are hollowed out beneath the surface. Creating a wild space system. A typical wild space system has a sun plus a number of planets and moons orbiting it. Two examples of willed space systems, Doom Space and Exerixis Space, are described in the accompanying adventure, Light of Exerixis. Use them as models when creating your own willed space system. Travel between worlds. World-to-world travel requires a spelljamming ship, a teleport spell, or some other kind of magic. Within a wild space system, the DM must decide how long it takes a spelljamming ship to travel from one world to another. This task is made easier if the DM has a diagram that shows how far away each world is from the center of the system. The diagrams of Doom Space and Xerxes Space in light of Xerxes serve as examples. Using such a diagram, you can calculate the shortest possible voyage when the two worlds are as close to one another as possible, and longest possible voyage when the two worlds are as far apart as they can be. Travel between systems. A creature or ship that wants to travel from one wild space system to another must cross the astral sea unless it has some other magical means of traveling from one world in the multiverse to another. Wild space systems aren't fixed in certain locations in the multiverse because they're constantly in motion, like corks bobbing in water. No reliable devices exist to help plot a course from one wild space system to another. Fortunately for travelers, the nature of the astral sea makes such journeys relatively easy, as discussed in the next section. Traversing the astral sea. The astral sea not only has gravity, see gravity planes above, but also breathable, comfortable air. But is the air real, or does this heavenly realm merely trick creatures into thinking they're breathing? In the astral sea, one can never be certain. All that really matters is that a creature can survive indefinitely in the astral sea, never aging and never feeling hunger or thirst. Sidebar: tracking time in wild space. Local time varies from world to world and from one wild space system to the next, depending on rotational periods, custom, and a host of other factors. Astral travelers often rely on what is considered the standard way of keeping time. A standard day is 24 hours long. A standard week is 7 standard days, and a standard month is 4 standard weeks, 28 standard days. The typical method for determining the length of a year, the amount of time that passes during a complete cycle of the seasons, has no meaning or usefulness for individuals who spend most of their time on the astral plane. For this reason, astral travelers avoid using years as a measurement of time. Travel by thought alone. A creature doesn't need a vessel to travel through the astral sea. In this realm, a traveler has the option of propelling itself by thought alone. The more intelligent a creature is, the faster it can move. A creature that chooses to move in this fashion can move in any direction at a flying speed, in feet equal to 5x its intelligence score. Astral sea navigation. One doesn't need a map to navigate the astral sea. Here, all creatures are blessed with directional awareness. In other words, a creature can get to where it wants to go by thinking of its destination, at which point it becomes aware of the most direct route to that location. The destination must be somewhere in the astral sea or in wild space, such as the nearest Githyanki outpost, the astral dominion of Hestivar, or realm space. This directional awareness doesn't reveal how safe the route is, and the DM decides how far away the destination is and how perilous the trek through the astral sea is. Temperature. The ambient temperature on the astral plane is about the same as on a moderate summer day in the temperate region of most worlds. Since there are no seasons in wild space or the astral sea, this temperature remains constant at all times. Some wild space systems, however, have significantly higher or lower temperatures. Kryn space, for example, has a very low natural temperature, about 16 degrees Fahrenheit, and clouds of ice particles swirl in the vacuum within its boundaries. Of course, as one approaches a star that puts out heat, the ambient temperature increases. Astral fishing. Fishing is a popular pastime in wild space and the astral sea, though this activity isn't possible aboard a ship that is moving faster than its flying speed, discussed later in this chapter. Wild space settlements sell basic fishing equipment for 1 SPI. For that, you get a pole, a line, a hook, and either a lure or some bait. At the end of each hour spent fishing, a character can make a DC 15 Wisdom, Survival, check. A failed check indicates no fish is caught during that hour. On a successful check, roll a d10 and consult the fishing table to determine the catch. Fishing table, for use with a D10. 1 to 2. Tiny, inedible fish, a creature that consumes it is poisoned for 1 hour. 3 to 5. Tiny, edible fish, feeds 1 person. 6 to 8. Small, edible fish, feeds up to 4 people. 9. Hostile space eel, see Boo's Astral Menagerie, feeds up to 12 people. 10. Hostile gray scaver, see Boo's Astral Menagerie, feeds up to 20 people, some other creature of the DM's choosing, or an tiny object of the DM's choosing. Weightlessness. In any location where gravity isn't present, the following rules apply. Impeded melee. When making a melee attack with a weapon, a creature that doesn't have a flying or swimming speed, either naturally or provided by magic, has disadvantage on the attack roll unless the weapon deals piercing damage. Movement. A creature can use an action to push off something heavier than itself and move up to its walking, flying, or swimming speed in a straight line. The creature continues along this course, moving in a straight line at its speed on each of its turns until something stops it or changes its trajectory. Magic. Magic functions on the astral plane as it does in most other D&D settings. The following sections present spells and magic items that are popular among astral travelers. Spells. The spells table shows which classes can cast the spells in this section and the levels of those spells. The table also notes the school of magic of a spell and which classes have access to it. The Artificer class is presented in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. Air Bubble is a second-level conjuration spell that can be used by the Artificer, Druid, Ranger, Sorcerer, and Wizard classes. Create Spelljamming Helm is a 5th-level transmutation spell that can be used by the Artificer and Wizard classes. Air Bubble. Casting time, 1 action. Range, 60 feet. Components, somatic. Duration, 24 hours. You create a spectral globe around the head of a willing creature you can see within range. The globe is filled with fresh air that lasts until the spell ends. If the creature has more than 1 head, the globe of air appears around only one of its heads, which is all the creature needs to avoid suffocation, assuming that all its heads share the same respiratory system. At higher levels, when you cast this spell using a spell slot of 3rd level or higher, you can create 2 additional globes of fresh air for each slot level above 2nd. Create Spelljamming Helm. Casting time, 1 action. Range, touch. Components, verbal, somatic, material, a crystal rod worth at least 5,000 gold pieces, which the spell consumes. Duration, instantaneous. Holding the rod used in the casting of the spell, you touch a large or smaller chair that is unoccupied. The rod disappears, and the chair is transformed into a Spelljamming Helm. See magic items below. Magic items. This section describes magic items that are essential to travel and survival in willed space, as well as other items likely to be found on the astral plane. Fish suit. Wondrous item, very rare. This bulky suit, which fully encases your head and body, takes 1 minute to don or doff. While worn, it enables you to breathe in an airless environment and renders you immune to the harmful effects of any gas that surrounds you. The suit also grants you a swimming speed equal to your walking speed while underwater, or a flying speed equal to your walking speed in an environment with no gravity. Spelljamming Helm. Wondrous item, rare, requires attunement by a spellcaster. The function of this ornate chair is to propel and maneuver a ship on which it has been installed through space and air. It can also propel and maneuver a ship on water or underwater, provided the ship is built for such travel. The ship in question must weigh 1 ton or more. The sensation of being attuned to a spelljamming helm is akin to the pins and needles effect one experiences after one's arm or leg falls asleep, but not as painful. While attuned to a spelljamming helm and sitting in it, you gain the following abilities for as long as you maintain concentration as if concentrating on a spell. You can use the spell-jamming helm to move the ship through space, air, or water up to the ship's speed. If the ship is in space and no other objects weighing 1 ton or more are within 1 mile of it, you can use the spell-jamming helm to move the vessel fast enough to travel 100 million miles in 24 hours. You can steer the vessel, albeit in a somewhat clumsy fashion, in much the way that a rudder or oars can be used to maneuver a seafaring ship. At any time, you can see and hear what's happening on and around the vessel, as though you were standing in a location of your choice aboard it. Transfer attunement. You can use an action to touch a willing spellcaster. That creature attunes to the spell-jamming helm immediately, and your attunement to it ends. Sidebar. Cost of ASPELLJAMMINGHLM. A spell-jamming helm propels and steers a ship much as sails, oars, and rudders work on a seafaring vessel, and a spell-jamming helm is easy to create if one has the proper spell. Create spell-jamming helm, described earlier in the chapter, has a material component cost of 5,000 gold pieces, so that's the least one can pay to acquire a spell-jamming helm. Wild space merchants, including Dowars and Mercanes, both described in Boo's Astral Menagerie, typically sell a spell-jamming helm for substantially more than it costs to make. How much more depends on the market, but 7,500 gold pieces would be a reasonable demand. A desperate buyer in a seller's market might pay 10,000 gold pieces or more. Wild space orrery. Wondrous item, uncommon. Inside a wild space system, this portable arcane device automatically tracks the positions and movements of all suns, planets, moons, and comets within that system, projecting a display of all these bodies in the space above its current location. In that display, a white, pulsating pinprick of light marks the orrery's location. Spell-jamming ships. This section provides descriptions of various spell-jamming vessels and rules that can be used when running encounters aboard them. Crew. The standard crew complement for a spell-jamming ship includes 1 captain to give orders, 1 spelljammer to pilot the ship, and 1 or more crew members to operate its weapons. Some ships carry extra crew, such as troops and backup spelljammers or passengers. A ship that has more than a standard crew complement will degrade the quality of its air supply more quickly. A spellcaster typically charges at least 50 gold pieces per day to operate a spell-jamming helm. Ship-to-ship combat. The following rules are designed to make ship-to-ship combat simple yet exciting. Starting distance. At the start of an engagement, the DM decides how far a ship is from its enemies. 3 possibilities are provided in the starting encounter distance table. The shorter the distance, the less time crews have to load weapons and make other preparations. Starting encounter distance table. 250 feet is long range for ballista, mangonels, short bows, longbows, light crossbows, and heavy crossbows. 500 feet is long range for longbows and mangonels, beyond the range of ballista and crossbows. 1,000 feet is beyond the range of most ranged weapons. Initiative. The Dungeon Master's Guide presents a variant rule called Side Initiative, which is ideal for ship-to-ship engagements, since it saves you the trouble of tracking initiative for individual creatures aboard each ship. Sidebar: Shipboard weapons. A spell-jamming ship typically has 1 or more shipboard weapons, ballista and mangonels being the most common. Such weapons are slow to load and fire. Player characters are almost always better off using their own weapons and spells in ship-to-ship combat, reserving shipboard weapons for targets that are too far away to be damaged by other means. Moving and steering a ship. A spelljammer can use a ship's spelljamming helm to move and steer the ship without expending their own actions or movement. On their turn, the spelljammer determines how far the ship moves up to its maximum speed and decides whether to approach another ship or put more distance between the two. On its turn, a ship can be turned and reoriented so that all its weapons can aim and fire at any target within range, regardless of where they're situated on the deck. Boarding. When one ship moves to within 5 feet of another ship, the spelljammer or pilot of the moving ship can maneuver it alongside the other ship, enabling creatures to move safely from one ship's deck to the other ship's deck until one of the ships pulls away from the other. A ship that has enough movement can pull alongside another vessel, deploy a boarding party, and then move away, provided the members of the boarding party took the ready action to position themselves so they can move onto the other vessel when it's close enough. Crashing. A spelljammer can run their ship into another object or a creature by moving the ship into the target's space and making a special attack roll, 1d20 plus the spelljammer's proficiency bonus, against the target's armor class. If the attack roll hits, a crash occurs. Otherwise, the target moves out of the ship's path, avoiding the crash. If the DM decides that a crash is unavoidable, no attack roll is necessary, and the crash occurs automatically. When a spelljamming ship crashes into something that could reasonably damage it, both the ship and the creature or object it struck take bludgeoning damage based on the size of the struck object, as shown in the crash damage table. If the ship runs into something that doesn't have hit points, such as a planet or a moon, apply the damage only to the ship. The ship stops after crashing into a gargantuan or immovable creature or object. Otherwise, the ship can continue moving if it has any movement left, and whatever it struck moves to the nearest unoccupied space that isn't in the ship's path. After resolving the effect of the crash, determine whether the ship's gravity plane is suppressed. See overlapping gravity planes earlier in the chapter. If the suppression of a ship's gravity plane would cause the creatures on or inside that ship to fall, they fall in whatever direction is appropriate for the sudden change in gravity. To determine the damage from a fall, see the falling rules in the player's handbook. Crash damage table. If a large creature or object is struck, it inflicts 4 to 10 bludgeoning damage. If a huge creature or object is struck, it inflicts 8 to 10 bludgeoning damage. If a gargantuan creature or object is struck, it inflicts 16 to 10 bludgeoning damage. Ship repairs. Non-magical repairs to a damaged ship can be made while the vessel is berthed. Repairing 1 hit point of damage to a berthed ship takes 1 day and costs 20 gold pieces for materials and labor. Damage to shipboard weapons can be repaired just as quickly, 1 hit point per day, but at half the cost, 10 gold pieces per hit point. The mending spell is a cheaper, less time-consuming way to make repairs. Casting mending on a damaged ship or shipboard weapon restores a number of hit points to the target equal to 1 to 8, plus the spellcaster's spellcasting ability modifier. The target can regain hit points from that spell no more than once per hour. Spelljamming vessels. Bombard. Bombards are built by GIF. The major feature of each ship is an enormous cannon that fires massive cannonballs capable of blowing other ships to smithereens. The cannon is included in the cost of the ship. A bombard can carry up to 14 giant cannonballs, each of which weighs 10 tons. These cannonballs make up most of the weight of the ship's cargo. A winch mounted on the aft deck is used to load the cannonballs on board. A bombard can float and sail on water, but it can't land safely on the ground. Its keel would cause it to roll on its side. For bombard stats and deck plans, see the book. Damselfly ship. This swift but cramped ship is made mostly of metal. It can't float on water, but its legs enable it to land safely on the ground. A sliding hatch just behind the wings allows access to the ship's mangonel turret. The ship's cargo hold can easily be turned into crew cabins or another weapon deck. Damselfly ships are often used as courier vessels and armored transports. Explorers and pirates like them because they're fast and sturdy. Military leaders use them as command ships for the same reasons. Damselfly ship owners are a proud lot, fond of painting their ships in colorful patterns, as well as customizing their vessels with special equipment. Large private gatherings of damselfly ship owners are not uncommon. They use these get-togethers to show off their ships and to race one another through asteroid belts and other obstacle courses, either for rewards or bragging rights. For damselfly stats and deck plans, see the book. Flying fish ship. Aside from space galleons, flying fish ships are the most common vessels in willed space, favorites among merchants and adventurers alike. A flying fish ship can float and sail on water, but it isn't built to land on the ground. The ventral fins would snap under the weight of the ship during landing, and the keel would cause the ship to roll to one side. Typical weapons on a flying fish ship include a forward-mounted mangonel and an aft-mounted ballista. For flying fish ship stats and deck plans, see the book. Hammerhead ship. Hammerhead ships are a popular craft, especially among pirates and merchants carrying heavy cargo. They can float on water and sail across it, but they aren't built to land on the ground. Their keels would cause them to tip to one side. Standard weapons on a hammerhead ship include fore and aft mangonels, a ballista, and a reinforced bow for ramming. For hammerhead ships stats and deck plans, see the book. Lamprey ship. Lamprey ships are antiquated, being among the oldest spelljamming ships still in use. Sirloins, see Boo's Astral menagerie, are particularly fond of them. Using the metal grappling jaws built into its bow, a lamprey ship can attach itself to another ship, which is a critical feature during boarding actions. Other standard weapons include 4 ballista on the main deck. A lamprey can float on water, though it can't land safely on the ground. Lamprey ships that land on the ground have the distressing habit of rolling over, as more than a few crews have discovered to their dismay. For lamprey stats and deck plans, see the book. Living ship. Druids, rangers, and clerics devoted to gods of nature are often found aboard living ships, as are wild space explorers who don't want to have to worry about their ship's air envelope becoming fouled during a long voyage. This ship's main distinctive feature is the fully grown treant on the aft deck. The treant has a speed of 0 because its roots are woven into the deck. It and the ship are inseparable. If the ship is reduced to 0 hit points, the treant dies of shock. The ship can function if its treant dies, but the treant can never be replaced with another. When the treant finishes a long rest, it repairs the ship's hull, enabling the ship to regain 412 hit points, and refreshes the ship's air envelope, turning deadly air into foul air or foul air into fresh air. A living ship can float on water and sail across it, but it can't land safely on the ground. Its keel would cause it to roll on its side. Its standard weaponry is an aft-mounted ballista. For the living ship's stats and deck plan, see the book. Nautiloid. Built and used by mind flayers, nautiloids are designed exclusively for space travel. They can't float on water, nor can they land safely on the ground. As an action, a creature attuned to a nautiloid's spelljamming helm and in physical contact with the ship can transport the nautiloid and all creatures and objects aboard it to a different plane of existence, at or near a destination envisioned by the spelljammer, or to a random location on the plane if no destination is envisioned. This property is a feature of the ship, not the spelljamming helm. Each time this property is used, roll a d6. On a 5 to 6, the property recharges after 1 minute. Otherwise, it can't be used again for a day. For Nautiliad stats and deck plans, see the book. Night Spider. Neogi terrorize willed space in ships of their own construction, which others call night spiders. These vessels often wait in ambush for other ships. Once a target ship is identified, the Neogi try to steal its spelljamming helm and capture its crew. A night spider's crew usually consists of 19 Neogi and up to a half-dozen Umber Hulks, which the Neogi use as shock troops. Night spiders are designed for space travel alone and can't float on water or land safely on the ground. The weight of the ship would snap its spindly legs. destroying its web-like rigging in the process. Standard weaponry on a night spider includes 4 ballista, 2 forward-facing and 2 aft-facing, and a forward-facing mangonel. For night spider stats and deck plans, see the book. Scorpion ship. Scorpion ships are archaic metal warships that have never lost their popularity, largely because of their versatility. Articulated legs enable a scorpion ship to land safely on the ground and move across a solid surface at a walking speed of 30 feet. The ship can't float on water, however. A ballista is mounted on the top deck, and a mangonel is perched on the end of the tail. The ship's 2 claws are relatively inefficient in combat, but a claw that grabs a creature can quickly take it out of action. For scorpion ship stats and deck plans, see the book. Strike ship. This swift vessel is a relatively recent design, quickly gaining popularity with merchants and pirates. A Shrike ship's legs enable it to land safely on the ground. The ship can float but isn't built for traveling on water and sinks quickly in rough seas. Standard weaponry on a Shrike ship includes 3 ballista, 1 on the forecastle, 1 in the middle of the top deck, and 1 on the stern castle. In a desperate situation, the ship's reinforced bow can be used as a piercing ram. For Strike ship stats and deck plans, see the book. Space Galleon. The Space Galleon is a mainstay among the host of vessels that ply world space into the Astral Sea. Space galleons can easily pass for ordinary seafaring galleons. Because they can land on water and move across it like their namesakes, they can sail into ports on terrestrial worlds without attracting undue attention. Like an ordinary galleon, a space galleon isn't built to land on the ground. Its keel would cause it to roll on its side. The ship's standard weaponry includes 2 forward-mounted ballista and an aft-mounted mangonel. For space galleon stats and deck plans, see the book. Squid ship. Among the oldest types of spelljamming vessels, squid ships are popular with privateers and are often used as patrol ships. Standard weapons on a squid ship include a forward-mounted mangonel, 2 aft-mounted ballista, and a reinforced bow for ramming. The tentacles that extend from the bow account for nearly half the ship's keel length. Squid ships can float and sail on water, and they can land on the ground. For squid ship stats and deck plans, see the book. Star Moth. Star Moths are ships constructed and flown by astral elves, who don't like it when these ships end up in the hands of others. A Star Moth's hull is fashioned from a grown and sculpted organic substance, and its enormous, decorative wings are made of shimmering crystal. The vessel is built for space travel, but its design does enable it to float on water or land safely on the ground. Standard weaponry includes 2 ballista nestled in the Star Moth's eye holes and a mangonel mounted above the bridge. For Star Moth stats and deck plans, see the book. Turtle ship. A turtle ship is encased in a protective metal shell, as befits its name, and bristles with weapons. In addition to its roomy quarters, it can carry a decent-sized payload, making it popular among traders and others who need a lot of cargo space. The ship can land on the ground, and it floats on water. Sliding panels can be closed to make the hull airtight, enabling the ship to travel underwater safely, even to great depths. If the ship takes damage while on or under the water, interior hatches can be sealed to prevent the ship from flooding completely. Standard weaponry on a turtle ship includes 3 forward-mounted ballista and a rear-facing mangonel. These weapons can't be used while the ship is underwater. For turtle ship stats and deck plans, see the book. Tyrant ship. Beholders carve tyrant ships out of stone using their disintegration rays, and use these ships to wander the astral plane, looking for worlds to conquer and rival beholders to destroy. No 2 tyrant ships look alike, but they all have 1 or more features reminiscent of their creators, such as a bulbous shape and eye stalks. A spherical chamber on the ship's command deck functions as a spelljamming helm that only beholders can attune to. Any beholder that occupies this chamber can attune to it. Reducing a tyrant ship to 0 hit points not only destroys it, but also destroys the ship's spelljamming helm and eye stalk cannons. A tyrant ship can't float on water, but it can safely land on the ground. For tyrant ship stats and deck plans, see the book. Wasp ship. Wasp ships are lightweight wooden vessels capable of landing safely on the ground, but not on water. They appeal to adventurers because they're affordable and don't require a large crew. Pirates like them because they're swift. Aristocrats are fond of using them as flying yachts because the ship's cargo hold can be easily converted into posh living quarters. The ship's raised back provides high ground for a weapon emplacement, which is typically equipped with a ballista. For Wasp ship stats and deck plans, see the book.